The speaker tonight, Rebecca Heller, and her talk is titled The Path to High Performance. Rebecca was born and raised here in Ottawa, and she began sailing on the Ottawa River. At 15, she began sailing 49ers, and I guess that's when the speed bug first got her. And I guess looking further into the future, she's set her sights on going to the Olympics at some point. I'm not sure whether it's the upcoming Olympics, but I guess time will tell how that works out. Now, off the water, Rebecca is pursuing a degree in biomedical mechanical engineering. And so she too will have a ring soon someday. So at the University of Ottawa. So I'd like to welcome Rebecca Heller up here to start on her presentation.
Hello. And I know not all of you know me, but some of you do. I am Rebecca. And before I get into telling you about myself, I want to ask you guys a question, so you can raise your hands. Who has had the dream of going to the Olympics one day, maybe, in whatever sport, it doesn't matter? Perfect. So, well, that's the first thing you get to learn about me, is that for those of you who've raised your hand, we share the same dream. And my entire sailing career has been driven by my dream, and every choice I've made has to get me one step closer to achieving it. So where did I start? My older sister started sailing camp here at NSE and started sailing the Opti. So naturally, I wanted to do everything my older sister does. So I also started sailing the Opti. I tried it out a few times, didn't love the whole bathtub vibe to it. I also was traumatized because my dad took us on the river and would flip the Opti and make us bail as practice. So I looked for the next best thing, which happened to be the open skiff. And this boat made me realize that sailing was my sport, and And so I started here too at Nepean Sailing Club in the sailing school when they switched from the Optis to the open skiff. So it worked out in my favor because I hated bailing. And from this program, I got into racing the open skiff, which introduced me to this whole new competitive side of sailing I wasn't getting before. And made me love it so much more because I'm a competitive person. And I continued to sail at the club here for the following years and sail at the FIVA with my older sister. But this was more as a fun thing to do during the summer rather than have that competitive side. And I knew I was at a standstill, and I wasn't sailing as much as I wanted to, so I wasn't getting closer to my goals. And I heard that the Junior Worlds for the FX, the 49er FX, were happening in Kingston. And I decided to go watch them because I figured Junior Worlds, well, that sounds like something that would get me closer to going to the Olympics. And after spending 5 minutes watching them, I decided, yep, that is what I want to do next. I want to get into an Olympic class boat. So I found an old, very old boat that was in some desperate need of love. So I spent my winter sanding for days and days and re-rigging and painting and giving it all the love it needs. So that summer I could use it as my training boat in the FX. And then from there, I taught myself how to helmet. I started off on these rivers too. It wasn't pretty, but I started here. And then I spent the next 3 years training in Kingston because I realized there wasn't a lot of skiff sailing happening here at the time. And I needed to be around other boats like me and have coaching experience like that too. So I went to Kingston for the next 3 summers just so I could sail the FX. And as soon as you get into a higher level of competitive sport, it doesn't matter what the sport is, you start to see a decline of women representation. So I had trouble finding crew at the time. I was driving, so I needed a crew, and I couldn't find one that was really dedicated to doing the sport at a campaign level. And I didn't let this stop me, though, from wanting to continue. Instead, I actually used it as an opportunity to sail a bunch of different types of boats with a bunch of different people, like Danielle Boyd, who went to the Olympics in 2016, and Justin Barnes, who is on track to going to 2024. And it gave me this really big advantage because I was able to take skills that they had, like a very unique skill that they had, and collect it and put it into my set of skills. So always saying yes to opportunities like sailing with different people and any type of boat has been one of the biggest contributions to my success so far. And right now, I realize that sailing needs titles. You need titles to get any sort of recognition, and it's really hard to get recognized by people if you don't have that. And you want to see that people want to see that you are a serious athlete. And, if you've gone to Worlds, you get that. You get to say, like, I'm a serious athlete because I've gone to Worlds, or I'm a serious athlete because I'm going to the Pan Am Games. So until now, it's been one of the biggest challenges I've had to overcome is getting some sort of recognition from Sail Canada. So I heard that Sail Canada was doing a Canadian youth sailing team tryouts in 2020. So I decided that would be the best way to begin my relationship with Sail Canada. The only problem was that it was in the 29er. And if you realized, I went Opti, Open Bic, FIVA, and just completely skipped the 29er and went right into the 49er. But I never say no to sailing a new boat and never say no to opportunity. So I went to Florida with my, at the time, current crew, did the tryouts. It exhausted me. We did fitness tests at like 5 a.m. in the humidity, but I ended up making the team. So that's my little acceptance letter there. So I got to check that off my list, is make Sail Canada know I exist. And after the 29er stuff in Florida, I went back to sailing the FX, but then there was this whole new wave of sailing coming out. You hear rumors about SailGP and that Canada is maybe going to get a team, and you just hear how foiling is kind of the next generation. So just by networking, when I was in the FX, I got to sail with John Curtis, who some of you may know. He runs Wind Athletes, is also an avid sailor himself. So he jumped on my FX with me one day, and he crewed for me. And ever since then, he's been super invested in my sailing. So when Wind Athletes in 2021 bought 3 Wasps, by knowing him and him realizing that I'm a dedicated sailor, he decided that I was going to be one of the people to get one of those Wasps. So I spent my summer of 2021 learning to sail the Wasp and learning to foil. But because it was so new, there wasn't a lot of coaching. Well, there wasn't any coaching. Not a lot of people knew about it. So I decided that I was going to go to Florida. And while everyone was still hesitant about jumping into foiling, I was going to use it as the best advantage and get a leg up on everybody. So I went down to Florida to do some more training because it's too cold in the winter to sail unless you do ice boating, which is super fun. So I went down and taught myself how to do that. And when I was on the water in Florida one day, I was sailing pretty fast until this other thing comes zipping by me. And I look behind me, or I actually look in front of me at this point, and it's a foiling windsurfer. And at the time, I had no idea what that was. I thought it was crazy that it was some board flying above the water. So I went to shore, and then I asked the guys, I was like, what is this? And they told me it was the IQ foil. And so I went home and Googled it, and I realized that it was in the 2024 Olympics as a new Olympic class boat. So the IQ really could not have lined up more perfectly with my thoughts about sailing. It's an Olympic class boat. It's very high performance. it foils, it goes really fast. So I was sold. I was like, yep, sign me up. Only I really did not realize how big of a jump and difficult of a jump it was to go from boat sailing to windsurfing. At the start of my journey, though, I did continue to sail the Wasp just to keep developing my foiling skills while I learned how to windsurf. And I ended up applying and getting accepted to the SailGP Inspire program in Chicago last spring, where I raced against 16 very talented sailors and athletes between Canada and the US. And on the last day of racing, I ended up being the only female to qualify into the gold fleet. So then I was ultimately the top female. And with that title, I now get to represent Canada at the grand final, the SailGP grand final this May in San Francisco. So I'm very excited for that. Thank you. Yeah. And I felt that that was a good spot to pause my Wasp sailing journey and begin on my IQ one, because I had that to say I've been accomplished in the IQ or the Wasp a little bit. And I realized that if I was serious and wanted to get closer to my goals, I was going to have to put 110% into my training. And as was mentioned before, I'm studying biomedical engineering. So after a lot of negotiation with my parents, they let me reduce my course load so I could spend a lot of time, more time on the water. And much like how I learned to sail any other type of boat, I decided that the best way was going to be to teach myself. So the first time I got the board, I brought it. We live on the Ottawa River, so I brought it down to the Ottawa River, and I put it in the water. I thought it was going to be so easy. I got on my board, stood on it, and tried to pull it up, because I don't know if you've seen windsurfers much, but you start with the sail in the water and you have to pull it up. And I couldn't even pull it up. So I brought the board back. I just swam back to shore, and I was frustrated. I was like, I can't even lift it up. So I went to the gym. I started working out a lot just so I could lift the sail up. Managed to finally do that, and then I could start slowly progressing on the foiling part. And I started this journey this past fall in Halifax. And if you haven't noticed, I like to jump into learning new things. So it was also my very first time windsurfing. Before, I've never stepped on a windsurfer and jumped right onto a spaceship. So after 1,000 wipeouts and crashes in Halifax, I decided the water was too cold, and I had to go to the warm waters of Florida for training and to actually get some coaching in. So this is me with my new board and my first time getting my sail, and the first times on the, let's see if I can, this is a pretty good, my nice wipeouts. There's about 1,000 of those. So, and then I spent some time with the US youth team, just taking in as much information as possible and learning the basics of windsurfing and wind foiling. And from that, I realized there was a lot of skills that I needed to develop. So the US sailing team coach was going to Hawaii for a camp, and they heard that there was this lone IQ foiler from Canada who can't sail in Canada because the winter is too cold. And they invited me to come join them, / I talked my way into letting them getting them to invite me. So I went to Hawaii for a month, where I really got to feel comfortable on the board, and even taught myself how to foil jibe, which is a really big thing in getting competitive in this sport. And even though I wanted to go to the Olympics in the FX, I wasn't really exposed to that other side of being a high performance athlete. So the US coach really made us work as a team to help each other progress. We worked with a sports psychologist. We did a lot of fitness testing, which I nailed. Not that everything's a competition, but it kind of is. But then the coach also made us decide what our goals were and what was the best way to achieve those goals, and come up with a serious plan to do so. So this was kind of my very vague plan that I began with. I started with the U.S. Open Series in Florida, which is also known as which was happened to be the Pan Am Games qualifier this year. And leading up to these events, I ended up training with the U.S. development team now instead of just the youth team, who were so supportive of me, and they just wanted to see me succeed, and they really pushed me to get better. And they told me that it really didn't matter how I finished in these first two series, because the US Open is two series. It was one event in Miami and then the second in Clearwater. And so they said it didn't matter how I finished in it, that the first events in this IQ is going to be the hardest events you will ever do, and you'll be lucky to even finish a race. So I went in kind of thinking about that too. And after doing both events now, I can confidently say that they were the most difficult events I ever have done. But learning a new skill like this, you have such high expectations for yourself, and that's really difficult to manage, and something I'm working on to manage right now. But being a high performance athlete, you have to be able to have a bad day. There were so many days during like the US Open event that I was like, nope, that's it. I don't want to continue. This is too difficult. We just have to push through. It's very hard to see and accept that, it's taken so much work and energy and dedication just to get to this level. But everyone around you, or the goal you have for yourself, is at this level. So to see like, I need to fill that between is very scary and daunting. But I've crashed way too many times to go back now. So I managed to push through the event and finished in the top 3 countries at the event, which meant I not only qualified Canada for the Pan Am Games, but I also qualified myself to represent Canada for the Games. My entire sailing career has been me trying to get closer to my dreams. And for so long, I just felt like I wasn't going anywhere with it or getting any closer until this event. So it's given me this new spark of motivation to push myself even further and even harder leading up to the Games in October. So with that, I have now modified my vague little plan to a more intense plan. So the US Open event in Florida just recently made me realize I really need to find a high caliber coach. So this weekend, actually, I'm heading to Spain for the next 5 weeks to get coached by a European specific IQ foil coach who's been known to produce top athletes. And after this, I will be putting a few weeks pause on the IQ just to finish my semester at school and to do the SailGP Grand Final in the WASP. And then I will continue full swing after that, spending most of my summer racing in Europe with plans to do the Olympic test event in France, the Worlds in Hague, and a few other events in between. And I strategically chose these events as they either give me an intense level of international training or they are an Olympic qualifier. So the Pan Am Games are also an Olympic qualifier. After all my time in Europe and finally at the World Championships in The Hague, I have the goal for myself to be the top 23 countries in the world, because there is only 23 spots allocated to IQ foils for the 2024 Olympics. And racing at these high levels will also give me the skill set I need to go into the Pan Am Games feeling confident enough and highly competitive. But there is so much more than just the foil windsurfing skill that I need. And part of the issue is developing and establishing a training environment in Canada for Canadian athletes in sports such as windfoiling. And I'm having to seek out opportunities to get me there. So unlike other classes like the laser or like the 470, where there's years and years of infrastructure and support behind those classes, I have to pioneer a new path for future athletes who want to go beyond traditional classes. So for me, not only do I have the pressure of learning the athletic skill, but I also have the pressure of networking and finding opportunities that I can exploit. And, sadly, these opportunities come with a cost. So, for example, my total budget to become competitive enough at the Pan Am Games, so all that training you saw on that list for October is $70,000 to $80,000. Yeah, that's what I said when I found out. And this is just a range because I'm not sure at the time for the Pan Am Games how much support I will be getting from that or from our organizations. So alongside all this athletic development, I'm also building skills in marketing and working with potential sponsors. And so, for example, I don't know if you've heard of Magic Marine. I was just recently, within the last few weeks, named a national rider. So I needed gear and they needed more recognition in foiling. And so I now get gear. And, I'm constantly trying to develop similar partnerships with people and companies and just anyone who wants to be a part of this Olympic journey. And for those individuals who want to be a part of that journey, Wind Athletes is the perfect thing for any Canadian sailor. And with that, if you are to take anything away from this talk, know that taking risks is the best thing you could do, and that opportunity is, when it's handed to you, you just have to say yes, because that will help you reach your goals. Thank you. I cut it a little short, but I figured you guys can ask questions, so yeah.
As I mentioned, this is a volunteer group. We have a somewhat small budget, so I'm going to take that off your neck. Maybe you could just go over to your foiling, IQ foiling. I see that you have not forgotten Ottawa because you have our area code on the boat. Now, I don't know whether that was intentional or not. It was it?
I'm Ottawa-based, so I got to represent.
That's true, very true. Mind you, we're getting a second area code 343, but this is just fine for now.
On the training sale.
Okay, you can have this, and maybe you can go over and just point out the various aspects of your.
I can definitely do that. So this is my race sail. I just did the US Open with the sail. It's still a little salty. I haven't washed it off yet. But this is an 8-meter sail. So the women's Olympic class sails the 8-meter, while the men's Olympic class sail the 9-meter. So it's a bit bigger. And they also have a youth class too, which is a bit different than most other boats, because you see the 49er, they have a youth class, but it's quite different versus our youth class is a smaller sail. So they sail anything from the smallest being a 5-meter to a 7-meter, which is more common. And they also have a little bit different. So the men and women's Olympic class use this exact foil setup. So they have the same front wing, the same tail wing and mast and everything. And we also have the same board. So I don't know, there's a blue board there that you could see. Versus the youth have a smaller front wing and a smaller board that is white. But they're allowed to race in any sort of combination of those. 613 for Ottawa.
How fast does that go?
It can go 2 times the speed of the wind. So I think the max the max speed right now is like 34 knots on it. It's pretty fast. Yeah.
How fast are you going before you get the board out of the water?
Not very fast. So they actually have wind limits in the IQ foil class. So they won't race you in anything under 5 knots just because it's just too hard to get foiling, because you do a lot of pumping to do that. And then they won't race you past 35 knots. So actually at the US Open event, The first day we had no wind, so it was under 5 knots. And then the second day was the complete opposite, and it ended up being like, it was at least like 34, kind of in that dangerous zone. So they couldn't even get the safety boats out. So they didn't want to send us out, but coincidentally, after they called it for the day, a bunch of the IQ foilers went out and just went for a quick training session, figured they don't get a lot of opportunity to sail in that, and they will race you in that if you're at a Worlds or something like that. So yeah, you don't need a lot. You need to start planing, but you can do that.
Excuse me for a minute. Could you go to the mic, just because everybody else can't hear you? So, in fact,
I have to repeat the first question.
you hear me? No, you don't. You don't. Okay. But anybody else that wants to ask a question, you can form a lineup.
All right, Rebecca, my question was, the first question was how fast do you go before you get the board out of the water, which isn't very fast, so that's cool. Now, are you harnessed in at these 30 knot winds? Like,
No, not really. You kind of make that call yourself. So I didn't put it on, but there is a boom that kind of sits around this height, kind of shoulder height, and it has like one loop, and you're wearing a harness. In most conditions, as soon as you get foiling, you do a lot of pumping to get foiling, and then you hook yourself in and you're good to go. But as soon as it gets quite windy like that, you're getting really like jostled around, and if it's wavy, it's way too scary to like actually commit and hook in. So as soon as it gets above like 20 knots, people start like questioning it more. Advanced people will wait till like the higher winds, but I'm out of there just holding on at like 25 knots, downwind especially. And if it's wavy, you start considering it earlier. But yeah, sometimes high winds, you're hooked off just going. But I'm sure the guys at the like who won Worlds and stuff like that have just committed to being hooked in because it's the fastest way.
So, which body parts are the most challenging? Like, are your shoulders getting a real kick, or?
Originally, it was my arms that were getting really exhausted, mainly because I would just wipe out and my sail would fall, and I'd have to pull the sail up. And when it gets wavy, this whole pocket right here, it's kind of hard to see, but this is a giant pocket all the way up. It just fills with water, and it's a lot to lift back up. That was my kind of initial difficulty. And again, while pumping, it was taking me a lot of arm strength, mainly because I didn't have the right technique because I was teaching myself. And then eventually I started realizing that there was a better technique. And now it's kind of shifted into my legs a bit more, because going downwind, if you're ever interested, you should watch videos on these, because it doesn't matter if you sail or you don't. It is incredibly cool to see what they do. But going downwind, you're holding on to your boom, and you're pretty much on a 90-degree with your legs. So you're sitting in like a wall, like you're leaning on the wall sit sort of thing. So then after like a decent downwind, your legs really start burning, or your calves too. Just like your entire body is just dying when you're doing this. But
Mass produced?
I wouldn't say they're being mass produced. They are sort of like a one design, so they do just like pump them out all the same. They cost, for a whole new like Olympic set, like Olympic class set, just under like 15 grand-ish. But it was also like a kind of a good moment for me too, because when I was sailing the 49er, I don't know if you noticed that they've changed sails from the old style like blue sail to this new 3DI sail, and they're all black and fancy, and that whole new set costs more than buying a new IQ. So it was a good moment for me to transition to. Yeah.
What do you mean by pumping to get the board sort of out of the water? What does that involve?
It is an exhausting movement, but you're holding onto the boom. And so this whole setup kind of rotates on like a 360 axis and everything like that. So you have your hands on the boom, and you're just trying to get air, like some sort of flow in your own air. So you're almost creating your own wind in the sail. So you're pulling it, moving it in a direction where it creates wind, and then you immediately use that wind if there's like less wind to foil. If that makes sense.
How long does it take to get that process going?
If it's very light, a lot longer. People would probably do it for like 30 seconds or so max, and you should be getting foiling if you're good. But now they've actually kind of realized this new skill of pumping during racing. So unlike a lot of boats, maybe with the exception of like the 470, you can pump whenever you want during the race. So off the start line is like the most important moment in the IQ foil, just because everything else happens so fast. So you see a lot of people pumping right off the start line. I think if you're at any serious level event, everyone is just pumping, gets you higher lanes, you go faster. And they do that for all, like, I'd say like half of their upwind leg. So that can be like a minute of pumping, which I wear a heart rate monitor, and my heart rate monitor just like skyrockets during that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi Rebecca. Your story is really inspirational and good work with what you're doing. I just had a couple of quick questions. I'm going back to really long ago windsurfing as it was originally, sailboarding days, and Kingston's a great place to sail. I raced at the '83 Worlds in Kingston for windsurfer when Canada hosted it. And I just went in from the shortboard world. You were talking about how hard it is to uphaul that big sail. An 8-meter sail is a pretty big sail for sure in high winds. So I'm just wondering, because I don't really know the hull you're on, whether you could use like deep, like water start technique that we used on shortboards, so that you're not having to uphaul the sail. You're just lying in the water and letting the sail do the work to get you up, right?
Yeah, you can definitely use like the water starts for that. I have yet to learn that trick, just because I came from like boat sailing, and a lot of people who know that trick came right from windsurfing. So I'm still trying to learn it. I tried it the other day on the water, and I like kicked my foil, and they're so sharp. So I like cut my toe, and that was it for me learning it that day. But if you follow the right way, you can definitely water start. So you see, like, we launch off of a beach most of the time, and you like walk your board out, flip the foil back down into the water, and you see like the really good guys just like put their feet in and up and off they go from the water starts. So definitely option. And even in racing too, it's such an important skill. If you wipe out, then it's just super easy to water start like that.
Yep, for sure. I mean, it makes sense to me to do that. Now, the other thing I just wanted to ask you was in terms of the flotation on the hull. So there's only one hull size at any wind, like it's a one design class, right?
Yeah. So
But how many liters, or what's the volume of the hull? Do you know off the top of your head? But anyway, I mean, at your size compared to somebody much bigger, like me, there's a big difference in both the flotation quotient, but the drag as well, right? That you're experiencing with that. Although once you're foiling, I guess the drag's gone. But
generally they do a different type of racing for like the lower winds, and so they actually do slalom, where you do a reach. You start on like a reach down, and then do some like downwind jibes. And they have a rule of if the first person managed to finish the race, then they count it. But as soon as like over half the fleet stops foiling, they just abandon the race. Yeah.
okay, well, thanks very much, and best of luck to you.
I thought this was a great talk, but I was really confused about one thing, Becca. So I'm wondering if I could help you and you could do a bit of a demo of something. I know you don't have your board here, so I'm just going to... So nobody can see the foil from the back. So if this is the board,
Yeah.
how does this foil thing work?
We'll come show you.
And raise that a little higher.
With help, yes. Oh, you're actually not tall enough.
It kind of sits under like that. So then the water line is within this range of the foil. And then the scary range is when you start getting down here and you start seeing the foil come out of the water. Yeah.
So why are there two wings on it?
That has to do with the lovely physics of this very complicated device. Yeah. Yeah, it literally, if you know anything about planes, it works the exact same way. So, yeah. Yes. Oh. Yeah. A little bit. It was asking if the front is lift and the back is kind of the opposite. The back's kind of like this equalizer one, where like the water flows over the front foil, and then the back sort of helps equalize it. You get I wouldn't say it does the opposite as the front, but because it also adds lift. So they both kind of work in conjoint to lift the board.
The angle of the board, bow up and down with your feet?
Yes. Yeah. So that's kind of the other thing about windsurfing. You haven't done, or I guess more so foil windsurfing, is you're doing it all based on your body weight, which actually helped me a lot coming from the 49er, because that's also a fair amount of balance and body weight movement. So you have, if you see here, there's 2 spots here. So you have 2 foot straps, have your feet in there, and you're just constantly moving back and forth like this. You can kind of see me moving a little bit back and forth just to help keep that ride height even. So that was actually, when I was in Halifax for a while, that was my main focus, was to just get foiling 1, 2, just stay balanced on it, because it's not a lot in the water. Yeah.
I'm fairly new to windsurfing, so these are going to be pretty basic questions. But but like are like doing tacking and like maneuvers like that, like do you try to avoid them as much as you can?
You definitely do try to avoid them more than in any other boat. So when you start a race, you're already thinking like, am I just going to do 2 tacks, something like that, because you want to minimize them as much as possible, especially tacking, where anyone competitive should be able to do a foiling jibe, no problem. But foiling tacking is a bit different, where I'd say there's like a handful of people in the world that can do them. So, and they won't even do them in racing because it's just a little too risky. So they'll still go, and to do a tack, you go into it foiling, you carve into it foiling, and then you touch down a little bit, jump to the other side, and start pumping again. Yeah.
And how high can these boats point, like comparison to the wind?
Quite high, actually. I don't know like the exact angle, but especially so you get foiling at a bit lower of an angle to initiate some foiling. You get foiling, and then you can head up more. And then as soon as you put your foot in, I think as soon as you put in your foot in like the back foot strap, you can head up like a crazy amount. And then what's really cool about it is if you're ever like just not making a mark, everyone has had those moments where you're like, oh my God, like I'm not making it. You can start pumping. So pumping also gets you like a higher angle. And I think like most windsurfing is like that too, where you pump and you can get a little higher out of it. Yeah. Without question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Rebecca, couple of questions. The first one, do you ever wear a helmet, or is that something that you normally should wear?
Yes, absolutely. I always wear a helmet.
Okay.
Sometimes I don't if it's like 2 knots out. But it's actually a class rule, so you're not allowed racing without a helmet on. And they even say your helmet has to be orange or red to identify a body. So when it's in the water, yeah. So I've got a red helmet on all the time.
Okay. Second question, is there an optimum weight? And that's a very sensitive question because you don't normally ask a lady how much they weigh. But
Weight
is
is an open
weight,
question.
an optimum height?
There definitely is, which is really, so during our fitness testing, actually, they take our weight during our tests, and we do like a lot of rowing tests so that we can see the power to weight ratio. If you obviously have a higher one, you have a better chance of pumping or lasting longer foiling and stuff like that. So for women, they say like you really shouldn't even be racing if you're under 145 pounds. But the optimal weight is probably like 155 for women, and then men. I sail with more like Olympic class men, do that like training with them, and they're all like fighting to get like, we call it the IQ diet. It's just to gain more weight all the time. So they're like around 200 pounds. Yeah. They're all like every day they like weigh themselves as a competition, just like who weighs more. So
Well, there's lots of us ready for it then. Aren't
yeah. Yeah. And then height is like obviously not like 7 feet tall. I'm the U.S. sailing team coach actually says like I'm a pretty ideal weight and size and everything. I have to gain a little more weight, but
Are you
good height.
allowed then to wear bulky knit sweaters and jump in the water ahead of time to
You-
bulk up?
You actually are. So unlike literally like every other class, they allow you to wear a camelback racing. So that adds like a little bit extra weight. So if it's like a windy day, you find people putting on this camelback and like filling it with water, but not drinking it. And then they'll go to their coaches and drink the water, or they're gonna like wear fleeces and stuff like that just to add more weight. 'Cause it makes
But it's upper body weight. You want the extra weight up here, don't you?
yeah. I think it's just like I think it's like a little bit of a mix. Upper body weight's definitely kind of, I'd say, more helpful. But when you are foiling, you're sitting in a really like upright position. So it's almost like a chair. You're almost sitting like a chair. So all the weight is
Straight down.
it's kind of straight down. So
Okay. But
yeah.
you do shift your weight a little bit one way or the
so
other.
much all the time. I'm constantly like shifting back and forth and moving around. Like I find if I move my toe, it affects the board somehow because it's that sensitive. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, the last question might be a little bit off topic, but with your biomedical mechanical engineering program, just wondering how many years it'll take you to get that.
Every time I write an exam or something like that, I start calculating that. I'm like, okay, like if I take these many classes, and can I take one less class this semester and stuff like that? It'll sometime in the future. That's my goal. I think my goal for myself really though is really push until the 2024 games. If I happen to qualify for those games in this coming kind of late summer, early fall, and then there's like a last chance regatta next year. But if I do end up qualifying one of those two events in this coming year, then I'm going to put a bit more of a pause on school, actually like defer and just spend that time sailing, and then continue after. But if I don't make it to 2024, then I'm going to try and finish my degree, which lines me perfectly for 2028 to continue in that, like for the 3 years for 2028.
Where are you now in university?
I'm in second year, so not quite halfway.
For the sailing, I'm not familiar. Like, what is part of the Sport Canada? Are you part of that whole network where you're carded and are getting support through Sport Canada, or are you on your own right now?
I'm more or less on my own right now. I think just recently with doing the Pan Am qualifiers and making it, I'm getting a little bit more recognition, and hopefully that will lead to support from.
What do you have to do, like sailing? What do you have to do to get carding?
You have to. Okay, well, it's a little bit different. So because I'm from Ontario, they have one system where you can apply and kind of give them your results and stuff like that over the years, and they'll deem whether you deserve a card. So I was actually carded back in 2020 based on the Ontario sailing standards, or actually it was just like Ontario Sport. But then to get support from Sail Canada is a whole other story, and they expect you to be like top like 15 in the world or something like that. So yeah.
I guess different sports have different ways of moving up, like having national team trials
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. And it doesn't sound like in sport, in sailing, they have the same, that sort of network.
No, I feel like the people they choose for their national team is just based on like their like almost like their opinion of who's performing the best. So they don't have any sort of like official tryouts for their national team. They have ones for their youth team, which I did, and then they have an in between, which is their development team. So they also just kind of select like, okay, you're putting so much effort in as an athlete, come be a part of our national team. So it's not like any sort of official
Did you
trials for that.
try the RBC
I haven't,
training
but
grounds?
but I have really wanted to actually.
My niece did it. She won out in BC
No
back
way.
in 2018.
That would be really
And
cool.
she got a gold medal at the last Olympics in rowing. So
Oh, that is so
You
cool.
should-
In rowing.
yeah.
It's pretty good.
You should. Well, I saw you on the rowing, Eric. So.
Oh, we do so much rowing. Yeah. Yeah. Well, literally, that's what when I first met the US sailing team coach, I jumped on like the erg and within like the first few seconds, our like coach stopped up and he like walked over. He's like, "Oh my God, someone sounds like they know how to row." I was like, "Oh, it's just from like occasionally doing it." But yeah.
Hi, Rebecca. How are you? My question is, do you have any type of fundraising happening that we all can get involved in to donate some money to help you reach your goals?
Absolutely, yes. So John Curtis, who I mentioned before, runs Wind Athletes. So I set up my Wind Athletes profile with him. So they have all the high performance athletes who sail in Canada, and you can go to their page and find my name under IQ Foil and donate there. Yeah.
See if I can lift this. This is basically a plane. And if you want to increase the angle of attack of the wing, then you would lean back and put your weight further back. But if you get too high up in the water and you approach the surface, it starts to cavitate. You start to get air over this, and it's almost like a nosedive because you lose weight. And at that point, I guess you're back down in the water.
That is like the scariest moment
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, is when you start cavitating or ventilating, depending on if you're in warm or cold water. And you boils like that, so your board goes like that, so you shoot out of the water, and then it does the complete opposite right away. So then you crash forward, which is
Nosedive into the water.
yes.
Mark used to be a foil and wind champion.
Oh, no, not at all.
Oh.
But I know the mechanics. By putting your weight back here, you basically change the angle of attack, and then you go forward again because you want to keep it level. But the problem is there's winds and waves, which change everything.
Yes.
And you're almost going like this, I guess, all the time.
So much movement. And when I was in...
It's okay?
Yeah.
All right. I don't want to ruin your chances just by doing this.
Funny story. I have two of these front wings. Most people... Here, I'll put this back on and tell the story so anyone else can hear. Most people have like a practice wing and a race wing. And I was in Hawaii sailing, and I was sailing over the same spot I sailed every single day. And they're always warning you like, oh, you don't hit a turtle or don't hit a dolphin, something like that, because that's happened before. And I went right over the spot I always sail, but the tides were just like extra low that day and just nailed this coral head. And I was going so fast too. So I was like holding on to my, and I didn't see it coming. So I like shot off the board and into like the mast. And my friend was like sailing by. They're like, oh my God, I just saw you go from like zooming to like stopped in like negative time. And I like destroyed my front wing of the foil. But if the FX taught me anything with the sanding, I just went and sanded it. And I was like up at like 5 a.m. just sanding my foil so I could sail the next day. But it works now. I use it. So
The wing looks like it's in excellent shape. This is carbon fiber, I assume.
I have not used this wing too.
Oh,
It
I
is.
see.
It is
Okay,
carbon
that's why.
fiber. Yeah.
It is carbon fiber. This is carbon fiber?
Yeah.
Okay, and the bar is aluminum?
Just steel. I
Oh,
produce
steel.
Oh, it is aluminum. Okay, yeah. Aluminum.
Okay,
Yeah.
very
So
good.
it's a little high tech. You can like adjust these a lot too. So in the board, this sits in the board, this section here, and you can adjust how that sits in the board, and like there's rules about it, and you can adjust like that in the board. And then here underneath here, you can't really see it, but there's things called shims, and you have like 10 different shims with different angles you can put in. So depending on if you're doing slalom or it's windy and wavy and stuff like that, people adjust the shims.
So that changes the angle of attack of
Yeah,
that piece.
of that piece, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so men and women, it's the same in the like Olympic class, and then in the youth class, they have it a bit of a smaller front wing. So yeah, and then they also have a different style mast that's more common, but they've just recently started switching it to carbon fiber, but before it was aluminum.
You call that the mast?
Yes, mast. Not to be confused with the mast. Yeah, yeah.
We have one question from the internet, do we?
Actually, not a question, just a comment that I think would express what a lot of us are feeling. Hugh McGugan says, well done, Rebecca. I think you were off to a, quote, great start and wish you the best in the months and years ahead. I think we can all echo that.
Thank you very much for this presentation and outlining what your aspirations are in the future and how you're going to get there. So we wish you well, and we'll end up putting the website that you referenced in order for anybody that wants to make a donation to Rebecca's future plans. We'll put that on the YouTube channel, so that you'll be able to see that as well, both for the people that are here, also for the people online. So I'd also like to present you with something from the club for your time here. I don't think that's legal currency, but just to go with your Canada 613, this is something from the Sailing Club, and this is from our regalia stores, and it's a value of $40, perhaps a very small contribution to your future plans, and you can have a look at that and decide what you want to do. So thank you very much again for your time. Some years ago, there was a boat, I believe, here in the harbor, maybe 10 years ago, and it had four girls for sale.
Oh, that's our boat.
That's what I thought.
With 3 girls for sale.
Oh, was it 3 girls for sale?
Yeah.
You lost
2
one, eh?
sisters.
Oh, okay.
Sisters, yeah.
Okay, 3 girls for sale. So you're one of the girls for sale. Yes, okay. But I do remember that, and it was all spelled properly, not S-A-L-E, it was S-A-I-L. But I know where you lived up near Penny's Point at that time. Oh, that's boat's up there now, eh?
Still there, yeah.
Very good. So I just wondered if it was you, because I always thought it was an interesting name for a boat that your dad named you, you know, 4 girls for sale, or 3 girls for sale.
2
Yes.
sisters, and we both, well, my older sister was the head instructor here for a few years, and my younger sister she did a little bit of sailing. So 3 of us that sail. Thought it was good.
Very good. Thank you again for this evening, and we appreciate your being here. So there may be some questions from the floor afterwards that they come up and have a chat with you. So again, thank you for your attendance here tonight. And next week, remember, we're going to have a talk by the people from the Skipper's Plan on insurance and all the questions that you might have about insurance. So look forward to seeing you next week here, the same time, the same place, or out on the internet. Thank you very much. Good night.